The dust from the morning stagecoach hadn't settled yet when Violet Vance dropped the breakfast tray, her exhaustion finally catching up with her 19-year-old body that had been awake for nearly 20 hours straight. The ceramic plates shattered across the wooden floor of Murphy's boarding house, and she felt her heart sink as Mrs. Murphy's heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. This was her third job, the one that started at 5 in the morning before her shift at the general store at 8, and then her evening work at the saloon serving drinks until midnight. She had maybe 4 hours of sleep a night if she was lucky, and the trembling in her hands told her that luck was running thin. "Girl, that's coming out of your wages," Mrs. Murphy snapped, her round face flushed with irritation. "That's the second time this week." "Yes, madam." "I'm sorry, madam," Violet whispered, already kneeling to pick up the broken pieces. Her fingers were raw from scrubbing floors and washing dishes, and a shard of ceramic sliced into her thumb. She bit back a cry, watching the blood well up and mix with the spilled gravy. "Mrs. Murphy softened slightly at the sight. "Clean it up and get yourself bandaged. But I mean it, Violet. I can't keep you on if you're going to cost me more than you're worth." Violet nodded, blinking back tears that had nothing to do with the cut on her hand. She had been orphaned 3 years ago when cholera swept through Concordia, Kansas, taking her parents and younger brother within a week of each other. At 16, she had been left with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a mountain of debt her father had accumulated trying to keep his failing farm afloat. The bank had taken the land, and she'd been working ever since to pay off what remained and keep herself fed and housed in the tiny room above the laundry, where she paid $2 a week for a bed and a basin. She finished cleaning up the mess, wrapped her thumb in a strip of cloth, and hurried through the rest of her morning duties. By the time she reached Hoffman's general store, the cut had bled through the bandage, and Mr. Hoffman gave her a disapproving look as she tied on her apron. "You look half dead," he said bluntly. The German immigrant had a kind heart beneath his gruff exterior, but he ran a business and expected his employees to be presentable. "The customers don't want to buy from someone who looks like she's about to collapse into the flour barrels." "I'm fine, Mr. Hoffman. Just a small accident this morning. I'll wash up and look proper, I promise." She spent the next 8 hours measuring out sugar and coffee, cutting fabric and hauling heavy crates from the back storage. Her arms ached, her feet throbbed, and the cut on her thumb kept reopening every time she had to lift something. A rancher's wife came in and complained that Violet had measured the ribbon wrong, demanding she cut a new length. A cowboy buying ammunition made an inappropriate comment that she had to smile through, because Mr. Hoffman was watching and expected her to be pleasant to all customers. By the time her shift ended at 4, she had just enough time to rush back to her room, change into the slightly nicer dress she wore at the Silver Spur Saloon, and splash water on her face. She looked at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror above her basin. Her dark blonde hair was coming loose from its bun, and there were shadows under her green eyes that made her look older than her 19 years. She had been pretty once, or so people had told her. Now she just looked tired. The Silver Spur was already busy when she arrived, and the owner, Jack Calloway, gave her a sharp look. "You're late." "By 3 minutes, Mr. Calloway. I came straight from the store." 3 minutes is still late. Table 6 needs drinks and the boys at the poker table want another round. She dove into work, carrying trays of whiskey and beer, dodging wandering hands and smiling until her cheeks hurt. The saloon was thick with smoke and noise, and her head began to pound. She was delivering drinks to a table of cowboys when one of them, drunk and belligerent, grabbed her wrist. "Sit with us, sweetheart. You look like you could use some company. I'm working, sir. Please let go. She kept her voice polite but firm. I said sit. He yanked her down and she stumbled, the tray tilting dangerously. The drinks would have spilled all over him if a hand hadn't caught the tray, steadying it with ease. The lady said she's working. The voice was deep, calm, and carried an authority that made the drunk cowboy release her wrist immediately. Violet looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man standing beside her was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. He wore a dark hat, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and a gun belt that suggested he knew how to use the Colt revolver holstered there. His dark brown hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and he had the look of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, and there was something steady about him, like an oak tree in a windstorm. No harm meant, the drunk mumbled, suddenly finding his drink very interesting. The tall cowboy took the tray from her hands and set it on the table, distributing the drinks himself. Then he turned to her, his expression softening. "You all right, miss?" "Yes, thank you." She rubbed her wrist, which was already showing red marks. "I appreciate your help. Happy to provide it." He tipped his hat slightly. "Owen Quinn. I'm passing through Concordia on my way back to my ranch, Violet Vance. And I should get back to work before Mr. Calloway notices I'm standing idle. Violet." He said her name like he was testing how it felt. Pretty name for a pretty girl, even if you do look about ready to fall over. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just a little tired. Long day." "Seems like it. Well, Miss Vance, I'll let you get back to it, but if anyone else bothers you, you just holler." She nodded and hurried away, conscious of his gaze following her. For the rest of the evening, she was aware of Owen Quinn sitting at a corner table, nursing a single whiskey and watching the room with those sharp blue eyes. Every time she glanced his way, he seemed to be looking at her, and it made her nervous and flustered in a way she couldn't quite explain. It was nearly midnight when Calloway finally let her go. She collected her meager wages, 30 cents for the evening, and stepped out into the cool night air. The street was quiet now, most of the town having gone to bed. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and started the walk back to her room, her feet dragging with exhaustion. She was passing the darkened alley beside the bank when she heard footsteps behind her. Her heart jumped and she walked faster, but the footsteps matched her pace. She was about to break into a run when a familiar voice called out, "Miss Vance, hold up." She turned to see Owen Quinn striding toward her, his long legs covering the distance quickly. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by confusion. "Mr. Quinn, what are you doing out here?" "Making sure you got home safe. It's late for a young woman to be walking alone." "I do it every night. I'm used to it." "That doesn't make it safe." He fell into step beside her. "Where are you headed?" "Just above the laundry on 2nd Street. They walked in silence for a moment, and Violet found herself acutely aware of his presence. He was so tall she barely came up to his shoulder, and there was something comforting about having him beside her, like she was protected from all the dangers the night might hold. "You work 3 jobs," he said suddenly. It wasn't a question. "How did you know that?" I asked around. "Seems everyone in this town knows Violet Vance, the orphan girl who works herself to death trying to make ends meet." She felt a flash of embarrassment. "I do what I have to do." "Why 3 jobs? What are you trying to accomplish?" "I'm trying to survive, Mr. Quinn. My parents died and left debts. I'm paying them off and keeping myself housed and fed. That takes money, and money requires work. How much do you owe?" "I don't see how that's your business." "Humor me." She sighed. $147 still. I've been paying it down for 3 years, but the interest keeps adding up, and I can barely make more than the minimum payments while still paying for my room and food. He was quiet for a long moment. They had reached the laundry, and she stopped at the external stairs that led up to her room. She turned to face him, expecting him to say good night and leave. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How much do you make total from all 3 jobs?" "Maybe $7 a week if I'm lucky and don't break any dishes or make any mistakes that get docked from my pay." "Why? And you work what, 18, 20 hours a day, something like that. When do you sleep? When do you rest? When do you have a moment to yourself to just breathe?" Tears suddenly stung her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "I don't have the luxury of rest, Mr. Quinn. Some of us don't get to choose an easy life." "I'm not suggesting an easy life, but I am suggesting a different one." He took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here. 300 acres, decent water, good grazing land. I run cattle and horses. I built it up myself over the past 6 years, and it's finally at a point where I'm making good money. But it's too much work for one man, and I need help." "You're offering me a job?" "Yes. Come work for me. I need someone to help with the house, the cooking, the garden, managing the chicken coop and the dairy cow, helping with the horses when needed. It's hard work, but it's one job, not 3. I'll pay you $10 a week, plus room and board. You'll have your own room in the house, 3 meals a day, and you won't have to walk home alone at midnight ever again." Violet stared at him, her mind reeling. $10 a week was more than she made now, and room and board meant she could save almost all of it. She could pay off her debt in less than 4 months, but something about the offer made her hesitate. "Why would you offer this to a stranger? You don't know anything about me. I know you're a hard worker. I know you're honest because you've been paying off a debt you probably could have run away from. I know you're strong because you've survived 3 years of hell that would have broken most people. That's enough for me. People will talk. A single woman living on a ranch with a single man. Let them talk. I'm offering you honest work, Miss Vance. Nothing more, nothing less. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door if it makes you feel safer. I give you my word as a gentleman that I won't take advantage of the situation." She looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity. Still, she hesitated. It was a big decision, leaving the town she had known her whole life, going to work for a man she had just met. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. I'm staying at the boarding house tonight and heading out tomorrow afternoon. Give me your answer before I leave." "Thank you, Mr. Quinn, for the offer and for walking me home. Owen, if we're going to be working together, you might as well call me Owen. Only if you call me Violet." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less serious. "Deal. Good night, Violet." "Good night, Owen." She climbed the stairs to her room, her mind spinning. She barely slept that night, tossing and turning on her thin mattress, weighing her options. Stay here and continue the brutal cycle of 3 jobs and exhaustion, slowly chipping away at her debt. Or take a chance on a stranger's offer and possibly find herself in an even worse situation. The next morning at the boarding house, she broke another dish. Mrs. Murphy fired her on the spot, and just like that, the decision was made. She went through her shift at the general store in a daze, and when it was over, she walked straight to Murphy's boarding house and asked for Owen Quinn. He was in the sitting room reading a newspaper, and he stood when she entered. "Violet, have you made a decision? When do we leave?" His face broke into a smile. "How soon can you be ready?" "I don't have much to pack. An hour. I'll bring the wagon around. Meet me in front of the store." She rushed back to her room and gathered her few belongings into a carpet bag. 3 dresses, 2 shirts, a skirt, undergarments, her mother's Bible, and the tin box where she kept what little money she had saved. It all fit easily. She looked around the dingy room that had been her home for 3 years and felt no sadness at leaving it. She paid the laundry owner for the week and told him she was moving on. She stopped by Hoffman's general store to tell Mr. Hoffman she was quitting. He was surprised but wished her well, paying her the wages she was owed. She went to the Silver Spur and found Calloway in his office. "I'm leaving Concordia," she told him. "I won't be working here anymore." He looked annoyed. "You could have given me notice. I'm giving you notice now. I'll work tonight if you need me, but then I'm done." "Forget it. I'll find someone else. You were too skinny anyway." Customers like girls with more meat on them. She didn't bother responding, just collected her final wages and walked out. She had just enough time to stop at the bank and make a payment on her debt, explaining to the clerk that she was leaving town but would continue to send payments. He noted her new address, the Quinn Ranch, and she signed the paperwork. Owen was waiting with a sturdy wagon hitched to two strong horses. He helped her up onto the seat, and she settled beside him, her carpetbag at her feet. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as they left Concordia behind, heading north on a dusty road that cut through endless prairie. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The landscape was beautiful in its own stark way, tall grass waving in the wind, occasional stands of cottonwood trees marking creek beds, and the vast blue sky overhead. Violet felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally. Owen's face lit up. "It's not fancy, but it's mine. I came to Kansas 6 years ago with nothing but my horse and my saddle. Worked as a ranch hand for a man named Thompson, saved every penny I could. When a piece of land came up for sale, I bought it. Started with 20 head of cattle and built from there. Now I've got nearly 200 cattle and about 30 horses, mostly Mustangs I've broken and trained for selling. The house is small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room, but it's solid. I built it myself with help from my neighbor. You have neighbors out here, a few. The Hendersons have a ranch about 5 miles east. Good people. They have 4 kids and Mrs. Henderson is always trying to feed me. Then there's the Matsons to the west. They're older, been here longer than anyone, and there are a few others scattered around. It's not crowded, but we help each other when needed. Barn raisings, harvest time, that sort of thing. It sounds nice. It is, lonely sometimes, but nice." He glanced at her. "That's part of why I need help. The work is too much for one person and I'd like to expand the horse operation. Can you ride a little? My father had a horse when I was young. I used to ride sometimes before we lost everything. I'll teach you more. It'll be useful." They talked more as the miles passed. Owen told her about the challenges of ranching, the harsh winters and dry summers, the constant threat of cattle rustlers and prairie fires. She told him about growing up in Concordia, the happy years before her parents died, and the struggle of the last 3 years. She found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone since her parents passed. There was something easy about talking to Owen, like they had known each other far longer than a single day. The sun was starting to sink toward the western horizon when Owen pointed ahead. "There it is, home." She looked and saw a small house nestled in a valley beside a creek. It was simple, made of wood with a stone chimney, but it looked well built and cared for. There was a barn nearby, a corral with several horses and fields stretching out in all directions. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing peacefully. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and Violet felt a surprising surge of emotion. "It's wonderful," she said softly. Owen looked pleased. "I'm glad you think so. Come on, let me show you around." He helped her down from the wagon and led her first to the house. Inside, it was clean but clearly the domain of a bachelor who spent most of his time working. The kitchen had a good stove, a table and shelves for dishes and supplies. The sitting room had a few chairs, a fireplace, and not much else. He showed her to a small bedroom that had a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the creek. "This is yours. I'm in the other bedroom on the opposite side of the house. There's a lock on your door like I promised. I'll bring your bag in. Thank you. It's more than I had in town. You'll earn it. The work starts early. I'm usually up at dawn to check on the cattle and horses. I'd like breakfast around 6 if you can manage it. Then there's general housework, laundry, mending, cooking for lunch and dinner. I've got a garden that needs tending, chickens that need feeding and their eggs collected, and a cow that needs milking twice a day. I've been managing, but just barely. Having your help will make a world of difference. I can do all that. I'm used to hard work." "I know you are. But Violet, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "If it gets to be too much, if you need rest, you tell me. I don't want you working yourself to death here like you were doing in town." "Understand," she nodded, touched by his concern. "I understand." Over the next few weeks, Violet settled into life on the Quinn ranch. She woke at dawn and had breakfast ready when Owen came in from his first round of checking on the animals. She tended the garden, pulling weeds and harvesting vegetables. She learned to milk the cow, though it took several tries before the temperamental beast would cooperate. She collected eggs from the chickens and even named a few of them, her favorite being a bossy hen she called Henrietta, who seemed to rule the coop. The work was hard, but it was steady and predictable. She had time to rest in the afternoon when her chores were done. She could sit by the creek and read her mother's Bible or just watch the water flow past. She ate 3 good meals a day and started to gain weight, her face filling out and the dark circles under her eyes fading. Her hands, though still work-worn, began to heal. Owen was a good employer and an easy person to live with. He was quiet but not cold, often sharing stories of his day over dinner. He taught her more about riding, and she found herself growing confident on horseback. He showed her the boundaries of his land, the best places to find wild berries, and how to read the sky for coming weather. One evening, about a month after she arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool and pleasant. "You seem happier," Owen said suddenly. She looked at him in surprise. "I am. This place, this life, it's better than I ever hoped for. I'm glad. You've made a difference here too, you know. The house actually feels like a home now, and knowing there's a good meal waiting at the end of the day makes the hard work easier." "That's kind of you to say." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "It's not kindness, Violet. It's the truth. I'm grateful you took a chance on me on this place. I'm the one who should be grateful. You offered me a way out when I had none." They sat in silence for a moment, and Violet realized that something had shifted between them. It wasn't just employer and employee anymore. There was a friendship growing, and maybe something more, though she was afraid to name it. The seasons turned, and summer gave way to fall. Violet had been at the ranch for 3 months, and she had saved enough to make significant payments on her debt. She sent money to the bank in Concordia every month, and the balance was finally starting to shrink in a meaningful way. Owen invited the Hendersons over for dinner one Sunday, and Violet met the family she had heard so much about. Mrs. Henderson was a warm, motherly woman who immediately took to Violet. Mr. Henderson was gruff but kind, and the 4 children, ranging from 6 to 14, were energetic and full of life. Over roast chicken and vegetables from the garden, Mrs. Henderson peppered Violet with questions about her life and her work on the ranch. Owen watched with amusement as Violet fielded the inquiries with grace. "It's good to see Owen finally has some help," Mrs. Henderson said. "I've been telling him for years he works too hard, and it's nice to see a woman's touch around the place. Those curtains in the kitchen are lovely." "Thank you. I made them from some fabric Owen bought in town." After dinner, while the children played outside and the men talked cattle, Mrs. Henderson helped Violet clean up. "He cares for you, you know," Mrs. Henderson said quietly. Violet nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "Owen. We're just employer and employee." "Oh, honey, I've known Owen for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That man is falling in love whether he knows it or not." "You're mistaken. He's just being kind, if you say so. But mark my words, before winter comes, one or both of you is going to realize what's plain to everyone else." Violet didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on washing dishes. But Mrs. Henderson's words stayed with her, and she found herself watching Owen more closely in the days that followed. She noticed the way he smiled when he came in and found her cooking. The way he always asked about her day and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. The way he had fixed the loose board on her bedroom floor without her asking, and how he made sure to buy her favorite tea when he went to town. Small things, but they added up, and she realized with a start that she was falling in love with him too. It terrified her. She had built walls around her heart after her parents died, focusing solely on survival. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, but Owen was breaking through those walls with his kindness and steady presence. One October afternoon, she was in the garden harvesting the last of the squash before the frost came. Owen had ridden out to check on the cattle in the north pasture. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear the rider approaching until he was almost upon her. She looked up to see a stranger on horseback, and her heart jumped. The man was rough-looking, with a scraggly beard and cold eyes. He dismounted and walked toward her, and she instinctively took a step back. "Afternoon, miss. This the Quinn place?" "Yes, can I help you?" "Where's Quinn?" "He's out checking the herd. Can I take a message?" The man looked around, his eyes calculating. "Nice place. He's done well for himself. I'll tell him you stopped by if you leave your name." "No need, I'll wait." "I'm sorry, but Mr. Quinn doesn't like visitors waiting when he's not here." "You can come back another time or leave a message." The man's expression hardened. "I don't think you're in a position to tell me what to do, girl." Fear spiked through her, but she stood her ground. "This is private property and you need to leave." He took a step toward her, and she grabbed the hoe she had been using, holding it in front of her like a weapon. The man laughed. "You going to fight me with a garden tool, if I have to?" A gunshot cracked through the air, and the man froze. Violet looked past him to see Owen sitting on his horse, his rifle raised and pointed at the stranger. "The lady asked you to leave," Owen said, his voice cold and hard. "I suggest you do it, now." The man raised his hands. "No trouble, Quinn, just passing through." "Then keep passing. And don't come back." The stranger mounted his horse and rode off quickly. Owen dismounted and walked to Violet, who was shaking now that the danger had passed. He gently took the hoe from her hands and set it aside. "You all right?" "Yes, just scared." "Who was that?" "Name's Carter. He's a drifter and a troublemaker. I had a run-in with him a couple years back when he tried to steal some of my cattle. I should have known he might come back." He pulled her into a hug, and she let herself lean against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. You came back just in time. I had a feeling. Something didn't sit right, so I turned around. Good thing I did." He held her for a long moment, and when she finally pulled back, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He lifted a hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Violet, I need to tell you something." "What?" "This arrangement, you working here, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years, but it's not enough anymore. I don't want you here just as an employee. I want you here because you want to be here, because you feel the same way I do." Her heart was pounding. "And how do you feel?" "Like I'm falling in love with you. Like I have been since the night I first saw you in that saloon. looking exhausted and beautiful and stronger than anyone I'd ever met. I know it's only been a few months and maybe it's too soon, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Tears filled her eyes. Owen, I'm falling in love with you too. I've been so scared to admit it, even to myself, but it's true. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Don't be scared. I'm not going anywhere and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise. I haven't had anyone to rely on for so long. I don't know how to do this. We'll figure it out together. He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Violet felt like she was coming home. All the fear and loneliness of the past 3 years melted away, replaced by hope and warmth. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we take it one day at a time. We keep working the ranch, we keep building this life, and we see where it goes. And when you're ready, when we're both ready, maybe we make it permanent." "You mean marriage, eventually, if you'll have me. But there's no rush. I want you to be sure, Violet. I want you to choose this because it's what you want, not because you feel obligated." "I'm already sure. But I like the idea of taking our time, learning each other, building something real." "That sounds perfect." Over the next few months, their relationship deepened. They still maintained separate bedrooms, both of them wanting to do things properly, but they were no longer just employer and employee or even just friends. They were courting, old-fashioned and sweet. Owen brought her wildflowers when he came in from the fields. She baked his favorite pie and left it to surprise him. They took long rides together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the ranch and the surrounding countryside. Owen taught her how to rope a calf, and she taught him how to make bread that actually rose properly. They read together in the evenings, her sitting in one chair by the fire and him in another, occasionally reading passages aloud to share something interesting. They talked about their dreams and fears, their pasts and their hopes for the future. One snowy evening in December, Owen came in from the barn and stamped the snow off his boots. Violet was in the kitchen, and the house smelled like the stew she had simmering on the stove. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Marry me," he said quietly. She turned in his arms to face him. "What? Marry me, Violet? I don't want to wait anymore. I know what I want, and it's you. I want you as my wife, my partner, my everything. Marry me and make this house a real home. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." She felt tears well up, but they were happy tears. "Yes, yes, Owen, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she felt the last of her walls crumble. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. They were married on a cold January day in 1882 in a small church in Concordia with the Hendersons and a few other neighbors as witnesses. Violet wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and Owen wore his best suit. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Violet felt a joy she hadn't known was possible. They had a small reception at the Henderson ranch, with food and music and dancing. Violet danced with Owen, her husband, and felt like she was floating. When they finally returned to their ranch that evening, Owen carried her over the threshold, and she laughed with pure happiness. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and loved. Afterward, they lay together in his bed, now their bed, and talked late into the night. "I can't believe this is real," Violet whispered. "A year ago, I was working 3 jobs and barely surviving. Now I'm married to the most wonderful man I've ever known. A year ago, I was alone and lonely, not even realizing how much I needed someone. Then you walked into my life and everything changed. Do you ever regret it?" "Offering me that job? Not for a single second. Best decision I ever made." She snuggled closer to him. I paid off the last of my debt last week. I was going to tell you, but then you proposed and it didn't seem important. Violet, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. The job, the stability, it made all the difference. We did it together. That's how it's going to be from now on. Everything together. Spring came, and with it new life on the ranch. Several of the cows had calves, and the garden began to flourish under Violet's careful attention. She and Owen worked side by side, building their life together. They talked about the future, about expanding the horse operation and maybe getting a few pigs. They talked about children, though both agreed they wanted to wait a bit, to enjoy being just the two of them for a while. In late spring, Owen surprised her by building a new chicken coop, bigger and better than the old one. He also built a small workshop attached to the barn where he planned to do more detailed work with the horses, training them for specific purposes to command better prices. Violet took on the project of expanding the garden, adding more variety of vegetables and even some flowers. She started preserving food for the winter, filling shelves with jars of pickles, jams, and canned vegetables. The house began to fill with the small touches that made it truly theirs: pictures on the walls, curtains she had sewn, a quilt she was making for their bed. One evening in early summer, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Owen reached for her hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About how much bigger this ranch could be, how much more we could do, but also about how none of it would matter without you. The ranch, the cattle, the horses, all of it, it's just work. You're what makes it worthwhile. You're what makes this a life worth living." She squeezed his hand. "I feel the same way. I love this place, but I love it because it's our place, because we built it together. I want to build more. I want to build a legacy, something we can pass on. I want children, Violet. When you're ready, I want us to start a family." She smiled. "I'm ready. I've been ready for a while, but I was waiting for you to bring it up." He pulled her close and kissed her. "Then let's start trying. Let's make this family complete." By late summer, Violet knew she was pregnant. She told Owen one morning at breakfast, and his reaction was everything she hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately apologized and set her down gently, worried he might have hurt the baby. "Owen, I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she laughed. I know, I'm just so happy. We're going to have a baby. We are. In about 7 months, if I'm calculating right." He sobered slightly. "Are you scared?" "A little, but mostly I'm excited. We're going to be parents, Owen. We're going to be great parents. Our kid is going to be so loved." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Violet dealt with morning sickness for the first few months. Mrs. Henderson came by regularly to check on her and offer advice. Owen was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much. She had to remind him repeatedly that she was perfectly capable of doing her normal chores. As fall turned to winter, Violet's belly grew round, and they spent the long evenings preparing for the baby. Owen built a cradle, sanding it until it was smooth and perfect. Violet sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They turned the small storage room off their bedroom into a nursery, painting it and adding shelves for baby supplies. On a cold February night in 1883, Violet went into labor. Owen rode through the dark to fetch Mrs. Henderson, who had offered to help with the delivery. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Owen, pacing in the kitchen, feared he might lose her. But Violet was strong, and when dawn broke, their son was born, healthy and loud. Owen came into the bedroom and saw his wife, exhausted but glowing, holding their baby. He sat beside her on the bed and looked down at the tiny face of his son. "He's perfect," Owen whispered. "He is. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without deciding. But now, looking at his son, Owen knew Thomas after your father, Thomas Quinn. Tears filled Violet's eyes. Really, really. Your father would be proud of you, Violet, proud of what you've survived, what you've built. I want our son to carry his name. Thank you. That means more than you know. Little Thomas was a good baby, sleeping well and growing quickly. Violet took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, and Owen was a devoted father, often holding his son while Violet rested or worked. They took turns with the night feedings, both of them exhausted but happy. As Thomas grew into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Owen's horse operation was becoming well known in the region, and he was commanding good prices for his well-trained animals. They hired a ranch hand, a young man named Billy who had recently arrived in Kansas looking for work, to help with the increasing workload. When Thomas was 2, Violet discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she wasn't as nervous and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring morning in 1885, and they named her Sarah, after Owen's mother who had passed away when he was young. Sarah was a calm baby, very different from her brother's energetic personality. She seemed content to watch the world with her serious blue eyes, so like her father's. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. The years passed in a blur of work and family, of good harvests and hard winters, of laughter and love. They added onto the house, building 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch expanded, and they bought additional land from a neighbor who was retiring. Owen's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and he began breeding horses specifically for certain traits, creating a line that was known for intelligence and temperament. In 1888, when Thomas was 5 and Sarah was 3, Violet found herself pregnant again. She was 31 now, and while she was excited about another baby, she was also more tired than she had been with the previous pregnancies. Owen insisted she take things easier, and with Billy's help, and with Thomas now old enough to do small chores, she was able to rest more. Their 3rd child, a son they named Daniel, was born in early 1889. He was a large baby, and the delivery was difficult, leaving Violet weak for weeks afterward. Owen was terrified, hovering over her constantly until she finally told him to give her some space to recover. But his fear wasn't unfounded. The doctor who had come from Concordia for the delivery took Owen aside and told him quietly that Violet shouldn't have any more children, that another pregnancy could be dangerous. Owen told Violet, and while she was sad they wouldn't have more children, she was also practical. 3 children were a blessing, and she was content with their family as it was. Daniel grew into a quiet, thoughtful child, more like his sister than his energetic older brother. The 3 children were close, playing together and helping around the ranch as they grew. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses, often following his father around and asking endless questions. Sarah loved the garden and the chickens, taking over many of Violet's former chores with enthusiasm. Daniel was the scholar, constantly reading when he wasn't working and talking about maybe becoming a teacher someday. By 1895, Thomas was 12, Sarah was 10, and Daniel was 6. The ranch was prosperous, and the Quinn family was well respected in the community. Owen was now in his early 40s, his dark hair showing threads of silver, but he was still strong and vital. Violet was in her late 30s, and while the hard work of ranching showed in her work-worn hands, she was still beautiful, her face showing laugh lines more than worry lines now. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Owen and Violet sat on the porch as they had so many times over the years. The summer air was warm and fireflies danced in the darkness. You ever think about that night in Concordia? Owen asked. When I first walked you home? Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. We were different people. Do you regret anything? Asking me to come here? Not for a second. She looked at him, at the man who had saved her in more ways than one, who had given her love and family and a home. Not for a single second. You told me I only needed one job, and you were right. But you gave me so much more than a job, Owen. You gave me everything. You gave me everything too. Before you, I had a ranch. Now I have a life. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars come out one by one. Inside the house, their children slept safely. The cattle and horses were settled for the night. The land they had worked so hard to build stretched out around them, solid and real. Violet thought back to that exhausted, desperate girl she had been, working 3 jobs and barely surviving. She thought about the moment Owen had offered her a different life, how terrifying and hopeful that offer had been. She thought about the journey they had taken together, the struggles and triumphs, the love that had grown between them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for offering me hope when I had none, for loving me." Owen raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with a dream. Thank you for building this life with me." As they sat together in the peaceful evening, Violet felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of love. Not an easy life, but a meaningful one. Not perfection, but something better, something real. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges. There was a drought one year that tested them. A harsh winter another year that they barely survived. Thomas grew into a fine young man and eventually took over much of the horse operation, showing even more skill than his father. Sarah married a neighboring rancher's son when she was 20, and they settled on land adjacent to the Quinn ranch. Daniel did indeed become a teacher, moving to Concordia to teach at the school there, but visiting often. Owen and Violet grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and good years. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experience and the life they had built together. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, Owen surprised Violet with a trip back to Concordia. They stayed at a hotel, much fancier than the boarding house where they had first met, and he took her to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. Over dessert, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Owen, what is this?" "Open it." Inside was a delicate gold ring with a small diamond. "When we got married, I couldn't afford to give you a proper ring. I've always regretted that. I know it's 20 years late, but I wanted you to have it." Tears filled her eyes. "Owen, it's beautiful." "But you didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to. You deserve all the beautiful things in the world, Violet. This is just a small token of what you mean to me." She slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. "I love it, and I love you. I love you too. For 20 years, you've been my partner, my best friend, my love. Here's to 20 more." They toasted with wine, and Violet looked around the restaurant at the well-dressed people and the elegant surroundings. She thought about the last time she had been in Concordia, exhausted and desperate, breaking dishes at the boarding house and dodging grabbing hands at the saloon. She thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked. "About how far we've come. About how different my life could have been if you hadn't walked into that saloon that night. Fate brought us together. Maybe, or maybe it was just one kind cowboy who saw someone in need and decided to help. Well, I'm glad I did. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Violet Quinn. And you're the best thing that ever happened to me, Owen Quinn." They returned to the ranch the next day, back to the life they had built together. The house was full again, as Sarah had brought her 2 children to visit, and Thomas was there with his new wife. Daniel arrived that evening, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Owen and Violet lay together in their room, the same room where they had shared their first kiss as husband and wife 20 years before. "This is what I always wanted," Violet whispered in the darkness. "A family, a home, someone to love who loves me back. You gave me all of that." "We gave each other all of that," Owen corrected. "It was always we, never just me or you. You're right. We built this together, and we'll keep building it together for as long as we have." They fell asleep in each other's arms, content and complete. Outside, the Kansas wind whispered through the grass, the same wind that had blown across this land for centuries. The ranch settled into the quiet of night, the house full of family, the land fertile and productive. It was a good life, hard-earned and deeply appreciated. As the years moved toward the turn of the century, Owen and Violet continued to work the ranch, though they gradually handed more responsibility to Thomas and the hired hands. They became grandparents multiple times over, delighting in the children their own children brought into the world. They remained active in the community, helping neighbors when needed and attending church every Sunday. When Owen turned 50, they threw a party at the ranch, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. The Hendersons were there, older now but still vital. Billy, the ranch hand who had been with them for nearly 20 years, brought his own family. Neighbors from miles around came to celebrate the man who had built something solid and good in the Kansas prairie. During the party, Mrs. Henderson pulled Violet aside. "I told you," she said with a knowing smile. "Told me what?" "That he was falling in love with you. That you were meant to be together. I knew it that first Sunday you invited us to dinner, and I was right." Violet laughed. "You were absolutely right. Thank you for being our friend all these years. Thank you for making Owen happy. He was a good man before you came along, but he was a lonely man. You completed him." As the sun set on the party, with people dancing and children running around playing games, Violet stood beside her husband and looked out at the life they had created. It had been more than 2 decades since that night in the Silver Spur Saloon when a tired, desperate girl had caught the eye of a quiet cowboy. More than 2 decades since he had offered her a way out, a chance at something better. She had taken that chance, and it had led her here, to this moment, surrounded by family and friends, standing beside the man she loved with all her heart. The orphan girl who had worked 3 jobs now had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. The lonely cowboy who had offered her 1 job now had a full house and a full heart. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, built on hard work and genuine love, on partnership and mutual respect. It was a life worth living, and they had lived it together. As the stars came out over the Kansas prairie, Owen pulled Violet close and whispered in her ear. "Still happy you came home with me?" She smiled and kissed him softly. "Every single day." And as the party continued around them, as their children and grandchildren laughed and played, as the life they had built together thrived and flourished, Violet knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home wasn't a place. It was this man, this family, this life they had created together from nothing but hope and determination and love. The years that followed were kind to them. They grew old together, watching their grandchildren grow and their ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by 3 generations of family, a testament to the love that had started with a simple offer in a dusty Kansas town. When Violet was in her 60s, she fell ill, a fever that wouldn't break. Owen stayed by her side day and night, holding her hand and telling her stories of their life together. She recovered, but it left her weak, and Owen insisted she rest more, do less. She complained that he was being overprotective, but she secretly loved the attention, the way he still fussed over her after all these years. Owen's health remained strong until he was nearly 70, when he took a fall from a horse and broke his leg. It healed slowly, and he walked with a limp afterward, but it didn't stop him from doing his daily rounds of the ranch, checking on the cattle and horses even though Thomas had long since taken over the day-to-day operations. They settled into a comfortable old age, sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset as they had done for decades. They told stories to their great-grandchildren, watched the younger generation take over the ranch, and remained deeply in love. One perfect spring evening in 1912, 30 years after their wedding, they sat together on the porch. Owen was 73, Violet was 65, and they had just celebrated the birth of their 7th great-grandchild. "We did good," Owen said quietly, looking out over the land. "We did very good," Violet agreed. "When I met you that night in Concordia, I never imagined all of this. The family, the prosperity, the sheer fullness of life. Neither did I. I was just trying to survive one day at a time. And now I'm thriving one day at a time with you." He took her hand, the hand that still wore both her simple wedding band and the anniversary ring he had given her 10 years before. "I love you, Violet Quinn. I have from the beginning, and I will until the end." "I love you too, Owen Quinn. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. Thank you for living it with me." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land they had worked so hard to build stretched out around them, fertile and productive. The house behind them was filled with the sounds of family, grandchildren and great-grandchildren visiting for the weekend. The life they had created together was solid and real, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they went inside together, hand in hand, just as they had done for 30 years. They had started with nothing but hope in each other, and they had built an empire of love. The orphan girl who had worked 3 jobs had found her home. The lonely cowboy who had offered her 1 job had found his heart. And together, they had found everything that mattered. Their story was one of hard work and perseverance, of taking chances and building dreams, but most of all, it was a love story. A love that had started with a simple offer and had grown into something strong enough to weather any storm, deep enough to fill a lifetime and true enough to last forever. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Not the ranch, not the cattle, not the horses or the land. What mattered was the love between them, the family they had raised and the life they had shared. Everything else was just details. As they climbed into bed that night, Owen pulled Violet close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, right where it had rested for 3 decades. "Good night, my love," he whispered. "Good night, my heart," she whispered back. And they drifted off to sleep together, content and complete. 2 souls who had found each other in the vast wilderness and had chosen to build a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one love at a time, until they had created something beautiful and lasting and true. Their story was their legacy, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. And long after they were gone, their descendants would tell the story of the orphan girl who worked 3 jobs and the cowboy who said she only needed one, who invited her to come home with him, and how that simple offer had changed 2 lives forever and created a family that would last for generations. It was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, and a life worth living. and they had lived it together, fully and completely, from that first moment in the Silver Spur Saloon to this perfect evening on the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had sustained them through everything. The end of their story was not an ending at all, but a continuation, a legacy that would live on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the land they had worked and the home they had built. And somewhere in the Kansas wind, their love would live on forever, a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other, chose hope and chose love.